Welcome. Thanks for attending to our talk. During the next 20-25 minutes approximately, my colleague Victor Martinez and myself, Raul Pareja, we will share with you our experiences adopting GitHub Enterprise at King. We will tell you a story about how it all began and the issues we found during our journey, like the challenges in how to manage an overwhelming amount of users and how to optimize the utilization of Git from the continuous integration ecosystem in order to be friendly with the performance and the resources it consumes. Let me introduce briefly ourselves. Victor and I, we are build and configurations engineers, and we work together in the engineering systems and support team. Our team is a cross-functional team. We have people with different skill sets. We have sys engineers working closely with infrastructure. We've got people with expertise in the tools. They are our technical administrators. And we, the build and configuration engineers, we work closely with the development teams in order to work with them together with the workflows and the tools for the continuous integration ecosystem. But we all together in our team, we share the same will, we share the same goal, which is to provide all the tech teams at King with the best suite and portfolio of systems, services, and tools in order to hopefully make their work lives better. And at the end, what we want to do is deliver games better and faster. About the company, what we do at King. At King, we make games for the mobile world. We have a wide portfolio of fun and popular games, and we have 4 global franchises. We got Candy Crush, Pet Rescue, Farm Heroes, Marble Witch, among many other titles. And according to the figures of the last quarter of 2016, we got an average of 355 million of monthly active users, which is a very nice feature. At King, we value a lot our company. We have a strong company culture, which is based into 5 pillars. Those pillars are what we call the King values. During this talk, we will be putting the focus especially in 2 of them, because the importance they took in some decisions we made in regards in how we administrate the GitHub Enterprise and how we adapt it to our openness culture. Those are fast and fluid. We want to be agile. We want to be problem solvers, and humble and open. We are open to listen, to share ideas, and those are the main values that we will be repeating during our talk. Our team was founded back in 2014, and in those days, we got already a few offices across Europe. We got one in Malmo, in Stockholm, in London, and in Barcelona. And in each location, we got Linux boxes running Subversion, Mercurial, and BearGit. We got 1 box per each location, and at this point, we realized that we had a real need for a better tool in order to share ideas, in order to foster collaboration between teams, wherever they were located, an easy way to browse the code of others. And we started to evaluate the different tools and the different products that were in the market. We have a clear idea that we wanted to embrace Git because the benefits it provides with the performance and the popularity with the open source, maybe not so good with not mergeable content, and we end up by choosing GitHub Enterprise as the best solution for our business needs. At this point, we started to evangelize the use of Git in the company and to provide some guidelines and some scripts in order to help them to migrate the Subversion and Mercurial repositories to Git. But at the end, it was easier than we expected because most of the teams took the ownership by themselves and they were migrating, so it was straightforward. And little by little, we started to migrate some libraries, some game engines, and we end up with the first game fully migrated. And we were very happy. We got all what we need to start moving the games progressively from the old platforms to GitHub. At this point, we got this setup. We have LDAP by means of an Active Directory group membership in order to grant you access or not to the GitHub Enterprise instance. And we were using the teams because on those days, the GitHub Enterprise is the way it worked. You got the organizations, and you got several teams and you granted on those teams read or write permissions into the repositories. And here is where the fun began, because we started to face the first issues, especially with the administration of the users and the management. Just to have some context, in those days, we were growing a lot. We were opening brand new offices in the United States, in Seattle and San Francisco. And we were also opening new offices in Berlin and Bucharest. And just to have a big picture, we reached a time where just in Barcelona office, we got an average of 20 new joiners per week, which was actually a lot. That implies a big queue of support for people that wanted to join the GitHub. We got the dependency on the Active Directory group membership, and at some point, we need to contact the IT guys that manage the Active Directory to tell them, please include those users. At the end, because we came to them over and over, they end up by hand-overing to us that administration. But even that, we were slowing down. We were not fast and fluid. We were not agile. We were slowing down the machine, and that's not the way that we wanted to be. No? So the first thing that we opted is to remove the LDAP dependency. So any Active Directory existing user at King will be able to get a GitHub account. And furthermore, as long as you are inside the King network, you won't need even an LDAP account just to read the code. We were opening. We were embracing the openness culture. But once we've done that, we end up with an overwhelming amount of users claiming for the right permissions. In such a dynamic company as ours, where we provide the freedom and the openness to all the teams to create their organizations wherever they need, it's really challenging to keep track of the owners. We also try to delegate the team membership to the owners of each organization, but it was difficult. We were not doing well. Again, we were not being agile. We were not being open. And at this point, we took an important decision. Just to put some context, the games are built on the top of game engines, and we got a set of libraries. And if you're working in a specific game, you may need to tweak a bit of a library. And if you don't have right permissions, you can do some workarounds, like, for example, forking the repository, create your own branch, ask for a pull request. Or maybe you can change the continuous integration scripts in order to point to your own user. But that's not, we are adding the hassle, no? That's why to have more context, why we need to be more agile in order to grant right permissions. So we end up with the decision to allow everybody at King, all the users, to have right permissions to all the repositories in all the organizations. The CTO and the VP from engineering, they got the feedback from the teams, and they supported the openness idea as it's part of our culture. We got some teams that wanted to be open, that wanted everybody at King to contribute into their code. And at the end, we took the decision to let's remove the barriers, and let's try to find a way to change the default behavior of the GitHub Enterprise in order to be, by default, open doors. At this point, we contacted the GitHub Enterprise support to have some guidance and some inspiration how we can do that. And we end up with the GitHub Enterprise API to the rescue. By means of the GitHub Enterprise API, which is pretty cool, you can do plenty of things, not everything at all, but it's very good. We started to code our own scripts that actually, the intention is to add all the active GitHub users as members of all the organizations. During this context, GitHub Enterprise changed the approach from organizations and teams to memberships, and that helped us to make our script better and easier. We tested on our testing instance, and as it was working, we said, OK, let's go to all the tech directors and let's tell all the kingdom that, hey, guys, that's our intention. We want to allow right permissions to all the organizations. And obviously, what do you think? People were happy with that? not everybody. We got two cases. We got some teams that still wanted to work as the old way. They don't want to have all the active users at King as members of their organization. And we got another case where some users need to have a restricted subset of repositories with right permissions. For example, if you are working with some automations and you want to be pretty sure that you will only be able to push in a certain amount of repositories. Because of that, we add those features in the script, and we end up with a solution that works for everybody. We are opening all the repositories to all the GitHub users. We are taking into account those organizations that still wanted to work the old way. And we were restricting the amount of repositories to a certain set of users. Actually, we wanted to take the chance that we are here in the GitHub satellite to announce the release of the first version of this script, but we got other priorities, and we're sorry, but we will soon provide those. We will provide to the community our script, so please stay tuned on the next slides, as Victor will point out to our tech blog. In the first part, we were talking mainly about how we adopted the tool, the GitHub Enterprise, to embrace the openness culture at King. But during this journey, we were suffering also performance issues. At the beginning, we were just scaling up, beefing up the machine by means of providing more CPU, more RAM, more disk. But we end up that the number of users did not correlate with the amount of resources we were using. And that was mainly because our most active user is the continuous integration infrastructure. And that's why we have Victor here to provide more details. So please, Victor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So regarding the performance issues, we'd like to highlight how we tackle these issues with Git. And just bear in mind, for us, continuous integration is quite important in the sense how it has been increased the usage. So we started just to grab some figures, and back 4 years ago, we used to do just a few builds per day, so up to a few thousands per year. And last year, we did about 2 million, so even more, of builds. We use Jenkins, so it could be any other tool, so that's the one we use. We use actively by every single site, so it's about 25, 27 Jenkins instances, about 600-700 Jenkins agents, more which are really static, and also we have some flexibility to run Amazon and these sort of things. But we're expecting this year to be like 3.6 million of builds, so it's a lot. So every year we are growing a lot. And it means the way we use continuous integration and the way we use GitHub are really tight, and we want to provide the best experience to all the users and to reduce the bottlenecks. So just say that we do have best practices. It's something we use. Obviously, the first approach is just having a wiki page. You just say, how do you think your system of continuous integration GitHub should work? You just use naming convention. Just say, if you do some Git cloning, please use shallow cloning. But, so you just specify some best practices. But it's up to the people, in our case, to decide to whether to use this or not. So it's more like giving just some advice. We run some trainings, we provide them some workshops, but it's the first initial approach to tackle these performance issues. So coming back to Git, the first probably iteration we did to improve the performance after having a catch-up with the GitHub support is just reducing the Git history when you are cloning when you are cloning to your repos to use by the continuous integration, you need to ensure the log history, you are tracking all the history you might not really require. So you reduce that by using Git shallow cloning. The impact of your GitHub Enterprise performance is really much better. So it means this is the first iteration using the Git shallow cloning. So you don't need all the history. Obviously, it did work well, but GitHub support also helped us to analyze why we were really using GitHub too much rather than trying to improve the continuous integration. The second approach we did is just reducing the pooling and using webhooks. So webhooks has been released back in 2008, so as the keynote. I was saying that, so it's been there for a while, so it's something that you can use. And it really makes sense when you do continuous integration, as you want to be sure you test, you build your system based on the commit you do, not every 5 minutes or every 1 minute. So this is one of the cases we realized like almost 1,500 jobs were polling every minute. It's really just a lot. And it's up to the team to decide to move away of this, but we agree between all the key engineering teams and users to move away. How did we tackle this? Just highlighting. This is just an example of one of the Jenkins jobs. Just highlighting, hey, you are using this job, which is polling. You are sure you want to use this. This is deprecated. It's affecting the GitHub performance. So let's try to move away to use webhooks. The second and third step is just trying to remove, The second and the third step is more about encouraging people to move away of that by disabling all the Jenkins jobs. This is just probably the use case. People move from one project to another one. There are projects that they are just dead, and they don't keep going in that production. Therefore, you would like to disable them, because you don't need to pull. You don't need to use that job anyway. And this is the third iteration we did to improve the polling and by using pushing. This is really working well, but still we work with games. We work with creativity people, artists, data warehouse. There are a bunch of different teams. They use GitHub. Some of them use with large file systems. And when you converge to do continuous integration of all the images, all the content, the game, the engine, so the repos can be really big. So I'm saying like 30 gigabytes, there are a few examples that we have of some repos which are really massive. That's why this is one example about the community. At King, we try to meet everyone that use Jenkins, that use GitHub. We normally meet every 2 weeks or 3 to share ideas, knowledge. How do you do this in your team? How a game studio can develop this faster? How you can improve your workflows, and so on. So this is one of the examples of this guy, Simon, who is in Berlin. He's one of the build engineers we have there in Berlin. He took the idea of why we don't use Git reference repos. If you are familiar with this, this is the way you can cache in your local system a copy of your repo. This is what we do with all the 600-700 Jenkins slaves. So basically, caching all the repos locally, and then your Jenkins jobs are just synchronized with that particular repo. And the only difference is just the delta that you need to synchronize between the last night or whenever you run your Git reference repo to the current build that you are running. So it reduces a lot the impact from the CPU RAM usage, and also it reduces a lot the time. It used to take a few minutes to just a few seconds. So you really see the impact by using this reference repo if you use more in a really big file systems and, big files and so on. So this is an example of how we built the community by sharing ideas. This is something about the action we did. We're more about reactive. So we found an issue. We asked GitHub support if they have some best practices recommendation based on the CPU load, log file, and the bundler, based on our experience. It's writing a wiki page. But we want to we would like to add more quality in the way we use the tools. You can use tools such as Sonar, PMD, Checkstyle, CoCI, I don't remember now the name. It's just a few examples that people use these tools to automatically detect whether you use best practices or not in the way you use the tools. So we decided to do something similar for Jenkins. Since Jenkins is based on XML files, jobs, which are just doing something, do we really apply the best practices if we were talking Git shallow cloning, Git reference repos, Git pushing rather than polling? So we came up with a kind of linting tool for Jenkins. So it's already a public, so you can download from the Jenkins plugin and use. In our case, we have also an internal solution based on our specific requirements, which are more specific about how we use that internally, but it's the same approach where I'm going to talk about that. So the name of this tool is Dolores, which is just a way of having a fun and friendly name, which is exactly the opposite. If you translate that in Spanish, it means pain. So we want to just make a joke. How painful could be you don't use the best practices? It's just a joke. Yeah, we just put that name. But basically, it's just analyzing whether you follow some practices or not. This is just an example of one of the Jenkins instances we have in Sweden. So it's about 4,000 jobs in that particular instance. It's 2 or 3 days ago when I took the picture, so the snapshot. It's quite greeny. It means more or less all the best practices we have, it means people are using them. So in every single column, you see a particular rule. Let's say, do I use Git polling? Then you will see in red, yes or not. But this is an overall picture. You can have a better picture of specific jobs. So we're trying to give this information to every user of GitHub Jenkins, and it's already integrated with our wiki page. It's already within Jenkins, so there are different ways you can interact with this. Based on the action we took about Git shallow cloning and reference repos, in this case, we see that they are not really polling anymore. So it's just using webhooks, which is good. In other cases, they are using Git shallow cloning, which is good. It's 60% or less, more or less, of using this feature by all the jobs. But as I mentioned, some of these use cases might not really be required by that particular Jenkins job or team, because they might need to push, then they don't need to use shallow cloning. Git reference repos is also quite good in that sense, so it's an overall metric of 60%, or succeed in this case, which is good. Again, use cases like, do I do continuous integration of once per day of this particular repo? Why do I need to cache that as a local Git reference repo? It doesn't really make any sense, because you might need more spaces in your agents. So this is just an overall view, how we automated and proactively try to encourage to use best practices of these tools, which are really related, continuous integration and the GitHub. Yeah, I'll say now it's more about how we use, how it looks like GitHub. We're talking about how was our journey, what was the issue we faced, how we tackle these issues, how we automatically improve our way of using them. But this is more or less an overall view of our infrastructure, just really high view. We use vCenter. We have 2 instances. They are synchronized every hour. We do a backup as well nightly. Just for the overall view, 1,200 active users, 2,000 organizations, and 6,000 repositories. That's more or less the number of the figures we have at the moment. It's a really big vCenter server we have, but yeah, that's more or less how it looks, the infrastructure. What did we learn from this journey? We are still working on continuous improvement, but I'll say there are 3 major topics. The first one is about the culture, how you use that culture to match with the tool. It was good to know like the decisions were taken bidirectional from the VP, CTO, and also from the engineering teams to elaborate this and collaborate together to have a tool that you can just use and share code between everyone. So it really helps the company culture in our case. Sharing best practices is good, and having a place where you can share these ideas is even better. So some people got good ideas of workflows and processes. In our case, just meeting these users every 2 or 3 weeks and just get the idea of how they use the systems, it really helped us to put this in practice. For sure, the GitHub support was really good, which means any issue we face, any doubt, we really ask them. So they are really awesome. So if you have any doubt, they're really kind to please, I'm pleased to help you. Our journey hasn't been finished yet. Our big next actions are related with how we can improve our large file system using Git. How do we use logging files based on the users that they are not really techie? So as an artist or creative or part of the creative team, they might need a different way of using Git. So having the same feature as you have in the public, it might really help. It's one of the features we are willing to use in the next release of the GitHub Enterprise. The proxy mirror is also good. Continuous integration is just one of the users, but there are users that they need to interact from different sides and just having a central repo at the moment, for us, it works, but just reducing the time for cloning and interact with the current GitHub instance we have, it might help them to have a better experience, so by having some proxy mirror. Probably I speak too much. So you have different sources that you can read further what we do, and you would like to read about more in the technical aspect. We have a tech blog. Just you have here some details. As Raul mentioned, we're going to publish this particular open source project shortly, and it will be some entries in the tech blog to just have more, to engage people to use this if they want to. Regarding the Dolores one, it was a really specific in our use case, but there is a public, as I mentioned, a public Jenkins plugin that you can use in your Jenkins instance. Otherwise, you can apply the same. If you use Travis or anything similar, you can apply these best practices which are already there. The last bit, we are hiring, so you want to speak with us afterwards, just please. Please, Raul.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. And you have any question, we can speak afterwards.
Thank you so much.